Hi, it's Winton with the Barefoot Consultants, and welcome to our Freelance Friday broadcast. Happy to have you here. Appreciate all those of you participating live, as well as those of you participating on the replay. In fact, we get quite a few people watching the replay compared to the original live broadcast, and I know how that is. I mean, that's one of the great worlds we live in, is the ability to time shift, and this has really changed the quality of life in many ways for the positive. It's part of the reason this whole time shifting thing is why the Great Resignation happened. People don't like having to go back into the office and do certain things at certain times, and for most jobs, that's you know uh, not ideal. That's not freedom. That's not flexibility. You're having to fit very tightly into somebody else's box. And uh, those of us that have been freelancing for a while certainly enjoy uh, not having to do that and have the schedule flexibility. That's the number one thing most freelancers cite as a reason for being a freelancer, is just the control they have over their own schedule. So that's a very important aspect of all this. And today, what we're going to talk about is the different ways you can use your knowledge to work as a freelancer. And, to go way back, depending upon how far you go, a couple 100,000 years ago, we were all hunter gatherers, basically. And we had to follow the herds and follow the what were the wild crops in order to eke out an existence. And then along came farming about 10,000 years ago, and people had to start showing up at the farm. And then maybe 150 years ago, with the Industrial Revolution, factories and that sort of thing built up into cities, and we had to go into cities. And then in the information revolution, really, it wasn't just the factory we had to go to, it was where the mainframe was. And you think of places like Manhattan and Los Angeles to a degree, but you had all these powerful resources in the financial towers. Particularly, I know that I did business for the companies I worked for in both Manhattan and Los Angeles, and they had these massive mainframe computing infrastructures, and everybody had to come into the building because there was no networking fast enough that would reach them at home. And so now we're in the age, really, for the first time in, pick a number, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 years, where we can actually do work, be productive, and not have to be at the location, whether it's the mainframe or the manufacturing facility or the farm that we had to go to. And that's what's so cool about being this age. And frankly, our nervous systems are not really wired to do this, just like they're not really wired to digest all the news that we get every day. There's our nervous systems evolved over many years, dealing with the information in our tribe and maybe in our town and maybe in our city. But we were never prepared for the 24-hour onslaught of any little, somebody hits a coconut on the head in a far corner of the world, and you're going to see it on the evening news or, on some news broadcast. So the great thing about this change is it's really empowered and enabled the whole freelancing thing. And I talk to baby boomers and people that are 50 plus every day, and they don't understand that they can take all those hard-won pieces of knowledge and skill sets and the resilience that they built up over really the last 3-4 decades of their life, and turn that into something that they can make money with online from wherever they are. And today, I happened to be in Cordoba, Mexico. And last week I was in Dallas, and the week before that I was in Panama at a conference. And you have the ability to work from wherever you are. My journey at this began in the year 2000. So that's, 23 years ago now, when I kind of got kicked to the curb for the company that I was working for. We had the dot-com bomb about that time, and my boss came in and said, I got some good news and some bad news. You get to keep your job, but we're laying off 3 out of every 4 people in your department. You're going to have to pick up the slack for everybody else. And oh, by the way, we're going to cut your salary in half, your compensation. And so that was just a crazy time. And I figured that if I had started doing what I did as a consultant, or what I've been doing as an employee for a variety of tech firms, that I could do that as a consultant, and I could at least earn half of what I was making. And so that's what yes, I appreciate that, Luke, that angry feeling of just being told that you're not quite good enough, not quite the person we want to do this job, and just sort of pat on the rear end and a push out the door. That's what happens. And fortunately, I made enough contacts and done enough of this kind of work that when I left, I was able to knock on a few doors and get my first freelancing jobs. And this is going back now, 22 plus years ago. And so the world of freelancing has changed pretty substantially since then. But when I talk to people, they don't get that they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom that they're able to share with others. And the problem is, first of all, they don't sort of inventory that and figure out what they've got. And then the next thing they don't do is they don't think about how to present that information in a place that makes a difference. I mean, imagine this. In the old days, if you wanted to be a freelancer, you'd print up business cards, and you'd probably go to Chamber of Commerce meetings and Lions Club meetings and all kinds of local events, and shake a lot of hands and pass out your business card and kind of hope something would happen. And now you can go on to over 150 networks that cover the entire globe and type in, just like a Google search engine, the kind of jobs you'd like to do, and you'll see hundreds to thousands of jobs listed every day. And instead of going through all that kabuki dance of, finding clients and having awkward conversations, you go into these systems and they just say, tell me what your background is and tell me how much you would charge me for this job. So the real benefit of systems like Upwork and Freelancer.com and Fiverr is that there's an immediacy to it. If you want to start working right away, you can start working right away. I had a boss that used to talk about this idea. He was quite the character, sort of long before mobile phones and anything like that. And he worked for a number of different technology companies. And he said, I'll tell you a secret. If you're ever out of a job and you ever need to earn some money to put a roof over your head and a meal in your stomach, you can go down and get a job driving a taxi, and they'll pay you at the end of the day. And I had no idea this was the case, and never actually wound up driving a taxi. But freelancing is the same idea. You can kind of get going and start making some money right away, and then over time you build that up to some more significant money, and that depends on your training and your background, and a lot of variables go into that. But for many people, that's turned out to be a great thing. So let's talk about some of the ways that you can make money with your advice. And the first one is your career advice. And I'd like you to think about different things that you've done in your career along the way that actually where you were asked to give your advice. It could be you're formally asked to give your advice, or it could be you're informally asked to give your advice. And I can think of some things in my career. I mean, people ask me to help them with sales strategies for major accounts. That was something that I did. They also asked me for personal advice on career. Should I stay in this job here for another few years, or should I take this job over there with different pay and that sort of thing? And so, for anybody listening live, I'd be interested to hear any kind of advice in the chat window that you gave. And good to see Tama here. Welcome in. And if you've got any kind of advice that you gave in your career, would love to hear a little bit about that from you. And that's there's kind of a formal side to that and an informal side to that. I was consulted a lot of times on marketing projects and that kind of thing. And so it's formal. It's you go sit down in a room, somebody's showing PowerPoint slides and says, here's our new launch program for a product or service or something like that, and you give them feedback on what's going on. That's the more traditional advice kind of giving activity. And then you have the other kind where somebody says, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And that's the one, in our Barefoot Brain program, we teach people how to end this, because basically what they're saying, can I pick your brain, that may be worth, $100 an hour to me, for $5. And you don't want to do too many of those. But there's always people that you worked with or family members that you're happy to let them pick your brain for an hour or two and sit down and help them out. And this is the source. And think about the kind of people that you had in your career, or if you're still in your career now, who's likely to come up and say, hey, can you give me 20 minutes? I want to pick your brain. And what is the topic that they want to pick your brain around? So there's career advice, and there's really two branches to that. One is the formal career, the area or discipline that you're working in, and then the other area is the informal, kind of the informal culture of your company, the organization you're working in, that sort of thing. So the next part of this to kind of come up with where you're relied on, you have bodies of knowledge. One individual I know was the person in the family that he was a banker, and every time somebody was going to borrow some money, he'd help them figure out how to finance it, what's the best rate, the best terms, that kind of thing. And he was kind of that center point. And there came a time when he retired, he was no longer with the bank he was with, and the family just kind of shunned him on that topic. They turned to other people. Of course, there's a lot of good ways with the internet to search around and find loan rates and terms and things like that. But he still had a lot of good knowledge. And this is the thing that a lot of people miss about the internet, is you get all the information that's out there. You don't get as much perspective when a family member or somebody you know well can help you understand what might be the best financing option for you. So that's kind of what, where he was able to help. He was disappointed that his family wasn't talking to him about that. And I suggested that, well, would you like to have people ask you, are you helpful in that? Do you enjoy giving people that help? And he said, of course, I love it. And I do it for free. And I said, well, what if you could get paid for giving that same kind of advice? Would that be attractive to you? And of course, he said yes. And so the idea of helping people figuring out financing and going ahead and putting that whole thing together is something that he did. And he went on to do that. And he found people that were eager for his advice and would pay him for it. And in some cases, those turned into repeat projects for him because, people buy a car, then they buy a house, or maybe they sell a house and, buy a vacation home or whatever it is. There's always these transactions going on in our lives. And the people that you consult with about those transactions also have other family members, other friends that are going through the same kind of thing. So getting an hour or two of exploring what your options are can be very valuable for somebody that's getting ready to spend, do a $500,000 mortgage. Having a banker that knows the ins and outs of that process and what the alternatives are and how the interest accumulates. This has been one of the great tragedies in some way of our generation, is there's all these crazy credit card things where they offer you money at a low rate or no rate, and then all of a sudden it comes along and kicks in at a very high rate, and that kind of thing. And so having somebody to explain your situation and have them help you understand what your best options are. And I know I've done that kind of thing on many different kinds of advice. And usually if I can talk to somebody for, half hour to an hour, I know 100 times more what's the better option for me than before that conversation started. And the biggest problem I have is convincing people that you can get paid for that kind of advice. And if they're not sure about that, usually we go on Upwork and push that up, look up jobs that they could do. And they're quite, surprised that very specific, very narrow kind of areas that they worked in or that their knowledge is in, there's jobs on there for people to do that. And then the third area I want to talk about for your knowledge is your hobbies and interests. And at least in my case, I've had a lifelong interest in photography. And I had started out building my own darkroom when I was about 9 years old. And, saved up, mowed lawns, bought a camera here and a lens there, and darkroom chemicals and stuff like that, and just really got into it. Did it professionally for a period of time. Kind of got sucked up into the computer industry. Did that for 20 or 30 years. But since 2007, have been living in Mexico and freelancing, and started helping people learn how to do that. And, have just been able to help a lot of folks figure out what their skill sets are and that sort of thing. And as a hobby, photography came screaming back into my life. I mean, I used it for snapshots and family photos and that kind of thing, but just, we had a website, we had a Facebook page, all kinds of stuff. And we put that, I started collecting photographs, and Google has this thing called Google Photos. And now I've got tens of thousands of photographs on there, most of them bad, but a few good ones. And so it's quite the experience to bring knowledge and wisdom. And a lot of times when I'm around photographing some things, people say, "Oh, that's a really nice camera," or whatever. And they ask you questions. Well, how should I photograph this? Or how do I get the most out of my iPhone taking pictures and that kind of thing. So it's very gratifying to take all that knowledge I learned since age 9. And in fact, as most of you know, there's very little chemical processing of film and photography anymore. It's all digital, but all the same principles apply about exposure, about retouching photographs, about color correction of photographs. All that's knowledge that I learned long before Photoshop ever came along, but it now all applies. It's in fact, it's much better. It's so, you don't, back then you had to worry about the temperature of the chemicals and the concentration of the chemicals and all those things. And of course you had to work in the dark, a dark room. That's where photographers work. And now you can do it all in the bright sunlight of day and make that happen. So hobbies and interest of one kind or another can be out there. And there's Renee. Good to see you, Renee. Thanks for stopping by. And so, who's got a hobby or an interest that they have very much, deep knowledge of? I'd be happy to get an idea on that because so for me, photography is one. Let's see, a little bit of, I grew up in Florida, basically on a beach, and that, I mean, swimming, water sports, that kind of thing was another one that I know a lot about. Didn't do professionally, but know a lot about in terms of my, just the activities that I did. I did, some lifeguard certification type stuff and all those things. So know a lot about living near the water as I did for 20 some years. So that's that might be a body of a knowledge that you would have. It might be in the realm of collecting, stamp collecting, coin collecting. For a period of time, I had a coin collection and knew everything there was to know about pennies, nickels, and dimes. That was kind of my beat. So enjoyed doing that. So do you have any hobbies or interest? I remember one person that we worked with in our program was an accountant, and he was coming to his retirement. He was completely bored with accounting. He didn't want anything to do with it. One of his volunteer activities he'd done is as a community liaison between the police department and the community. And in doing that work, he volunteered, and once a month he would ride with one of the squad cars. And they actually had these community representatives would help write up the police reports. They trained them how to do that. They would ride in the car. They would experience whatever the incident is. A lot of times it's a break-in or a car parked in the wrong place or whatever. And he was explaining to me that, the police officers consume at the time, I think he said in a day they would spend up to 5 hours a day writing the reports, just documenting what happened. And so it was a big advantage to have these sort of civilian volunteers ride in the police car and then do the write-ups of the police reports. And so he had this tremendous knowledge about police work, knowledge about working with a community on how to do this kind of liaison work with the community and the police force and that kind of thing, and went on to do that kind of work as a freelancer, writing articles about it. Initially he could just do it in his own community because he was part of that program. But over time, he was able to write articles that, how communities can do a better job of cooperating with the police force, and also how the police force could do a better job cooperating with the community. So lots of good avenues to tap for your advice giving. There's almost an infinite supply for that. So if you get a chance, we'd love to have you comment. What kind of specialized skills do you have? Specialized knowledge, specialized resilience by virtue of the work you've done over the years. And just drop it in the chat window there, and we monitor the chat throughout the week. Happy to, continue the conversation there. So with that, I'm going to close out our session today. I appreciate everybody dropping by. Appreciate any likes or loves you might want to leave on the way out. That helps spread our message out to a larger number of people, and always good to see more and more people understand how you can take your skills, talents, and abilities, if you're 50 plus or a baby boomer, and turn those into a very interesting income you can do from anywhere in the world on your own terms. So appreciate you. Glad you're here. Looking forward to seeing you next Friday For those of you that are in our programs, we'll see you on Tuesday night. And have a great week freelancing. Take care.